Alright, we got bad news for Toyota haters today because Toyota just issued a technical service bulletin on their 24 Tacomas with automatic transmissions that may have problems. Basically, there's been reports recently that 24 Tacomas have had some problems with their automatic transmissions and some have been failing. Now, I say some, and this is going to be an exercise in mathematical futility insofar as the mass is comprehending that the total complaints have been about 28. That's being very generous. The anecdotes range from 10 reported alleged transmission failures to 13, but officially on the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration's website, we got a whopping 28 complaints here of transmission failures. And that's truly being nice. These 28 complaints include all sorts of other complaints that have nothing to do with the transmission. But let's be nice. Let's round it up to 28. You know what? Let's round it up to 100. But yeah, let's look here and see how many Tacomas were sold in the U.O. 108,778 Tacomas sold. You get what I'm saying here? The number of transmission failures is statistically irrelevant. That's not keyboard math. That's not peasant math. That's actual real-world math. But Toyota is ahead of the game. They're on it. They know that the internet is going to turn this molehill into a mountain. And they've issued this technical service bulletin, which is not a recall. It's not safety related, presumably because the transmission could go into limp mode. And they've outlined 2024 Tacoma's certain VIN numbers that if it basically gives off a check engine light, an error code, it will be essentially the transmission and torque converter will be replaced free of charge. Now, if you've got one of these 24 Tacomas, you got to look up this technical service bulletin where the mouse is here, get online, and see if your VIN is affected. These are the VINs effective essentially before the production change. These Tacomas made in these two factories, which are basically two Mexican factories. The transmission may be affected. The key word here is may. But if your VIN is affected and you have you're getting some check engine error codes or whatever, then you are eligible to get the entire ACEN automatic transmission assembly and torque converter replaced in order to fix the issue. Now, the reason why this is good news for Tacoma owners is that Toyota is not running away from the problem. There's really 2 points here. Number one, the failures are statistically irrelevant. We have possibly 24 failures, possibly 13, possibly 10, but let's round it up to 100 out of 100. Over 100,000 of these things sold that aren't experiencing an issue. There was a production issue, not an engineering issue, not a design issue, but a production issue at the Mexican plant where these things are made. Toyota has identified the production run that had the issue. Beyond that production cutoff, everything else is good. So if you're not within that window, you're fine. You have nothing to worry about. But that's easy to say if you don't have a 24 Tacoma, especially if you don't have a 24 Tacoma that does fall under this window within the technical service bulletin. In other words, it's easy to be like, don't worry if you don't have one of these things that's affected here. So what's the reasoning, what's the logic, and what can kind of calm you down here? Well, it's just a production issue, and those are things that cannot be sorted out in R&D and in the development phase, and when they torture test these things to 1,000,000 miles. It's all done under controlled scientific conditions, and once they put this thing into actual real-world production, you're going to have those hiccups, especially in a first-generation model year, which this 24 Tacoma, of course, is. It's a new generation, and they're going into factories, and it's new, and there's going to be some bugs and kinks that need to be worked out. And this is exactly what those bugs and kinks look like that need to be worked out. Toyota's identified it. They're not running from it. They're saying, hey, these are the VINs that could be affected by that bad production run, and we're going to take care of it for you. Whether you're in warranty or out of warranty, if you're affected under this technical service bulletin, where you're going to get a brand spanking new transmission and torque converter. Yes, it's inconvenient, but again, that's just the risk you take with a first generation run here. So I think Toyota's ahead of the game here by taking a statistically irrelevant number of automatic transmission failures on their 24 Tacomas and saying, "Hey, we've got it. We've seen the reports. We're listening to the complaints. We've identified the causes here, and and that is a big if, you're affected by this recall, or excuse me, this technical service bulletin. We're going to take care of this. We're going to swap everything out, and you're going to be good to go." Now, ultimately, some doomsdayer or naysayer is going to say, well, this is the new Toyotas aren't built like they used to, and this never happened to the old Toyota. Yeah, it did. You just don't remember it because there wasn't social media and people whining on TikTok and Reddit and Facebook and YouTube and whatever else nonsense that's online these days. Many Toyota so-called bulletproof old-school Toyotas, last-gen Toyota Tacomas, GXs, Lexuses, Land Cruisers, 4Runners, blah, 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 doesn't matter what we're talking about. They all got recalled in some form or the other. Yes, engine failures, yes, transmission failures, and Toyota took care of it, and it became bulletproof again. Let's look at an anecdote, okay? Somebody's 2005 Taco with the V6, their transmission blew up with less than 15,000 miles. Long story short, they took care of the transmission, meaning Toyota replaced the transmission, and it's still going over 170,000 miles and shifts great. This is the old school bulletproof Toyotas that never had any problems. This guy's transmission blew up at 15K. Been there, done that. Toyota is not perfect, but they are the closest thing to perfect in the automotive industry. But what is better than that is that they'll do their best to make things right, as you see here with this anecdote of this person's transmission failure on their 2005 Tacoma transmission, and it's still going great, and they love it. It's been a great truck, they said. I'll be retired when the engine goes. So this has all been there, done that stuff if you're a Toyota fanboy or fangirl. Toyotas have had all sorts of recalls over the decades on their bulletproof models, and they've gotten the reputation for being bulletproof because the engineering is very, very, very top tier. And when they do run into production issues, they don't run away from the problem, and they fix the problem. This 24 Tacoma has an ASIN transmission, an ASIN 8-speed transmission, and all Toyotas forever have had bulletproof ASIN automatic transmissions. This new 24 Tacoma is no different. So while the Chicken Little sky is falling types will look at this technical service bulletin as something negative, I see this as something extremely positive and typical Toyota excellence of identifying a problem and making it better and getting to the bottom of it and being completely done with it. Because these 24 Tacomas, these new generation Tacomas, whether you like them or not, are here to stay. They're not going anywhere. They already dynoed these transmissions to millions of miles in R&D. They work, they're fine, these are just production hiccups. But there's still some valid arguments, and that is the Tacomas are made in Mexico now. So, the argument will be made, well, they're having these production issues because they're not made in Japan, even though Tacomas were never made in Japan. They were always made in North America, and yes, Mexico's part of North America. They'll still argue that, well, they're not made in Japan. They're made here in Mexico, so that's why they're having issues with transmissions. They don't know how to make them right or assemble them or glue them together right in these Mexican factories. But if you recall, Toyota had some issues with the twin-turbo V6 in the Tundra, which was made in North America, and the Lexus LX600, which is assembled and made in Japan. So the Japanese assembly line in their top-tier factory in Tahara, Japan, their Tahara plant, they screwed up the engines too at the Japanese factory. So I'll go ahead and argue that this is not a Mexican factory versus Japanese factory issue, but rather simply a new generation or new model generation. You get what I'm rambling here. New generation growing pains type of thing. Because the LX600 had issues in Japan and the Tundra had issues in their North American factories, and now the Tacoma's having issues in their Mexican factory, and the common denominator here is they're all new generations, which is why the argument's always going to be made by people to never buy the first year or first few years of any new generation model or trim of any car, because all the bugs will be worked out. You can see here that they've worked out the bugs. Production change effective VIN. That means post this a certain date, they fix the issues. And so when you end up buying a car, a new version 2, 3, 4 years down the road, these VINs go higher and higher in number, and all the little problems are sorted out for you. It's kind of like the life cycle of a caterpillar. Once the model is 4 or 5 years old, it's a butterfly. But in order to get there, it's got to kind of crawl along as a caterpillar and go through some things before it reaches its final stage of excellence. And while we like to look back and think and fantasize that these old school Toyotas, like this old school 4Runner, they just came off the assembly line on their first run and they were absolutely perfect and they didn't have any recalls, they didn't have any transmission or engine failures or any technical service bulletins. They were just bulletproof right out of the box. That's simply not true. So if there's any takeaway from today's video, it's take a deep breath, breathe, situation normal. You've got a first year of a new generation run on these Tacomas, and the bugs need to be worked out. They're just production bugs. This has all happened in the past. Toyota has not changed their suppliers. You still got an Aisin transmission like all Toyotas and Lexuses that came before them that are all bulletproof. Don't make a mountain out of a molehill. Toyota's already promising you a new transmission and torque converter if you happen to be one of the unlucky ones. Even if you're out of warranty, they're not going to leave you hanging. They're going to replace the transmission no matter what, because that's what Toyota always does. But if you haven't gotten one of these yet and you're thinking about getting one of them, if you can wait a few years, all of the problems, all the little kinks are going to be sorted out, and you're going to have that classic worry-free Toyota reliability. But if you didn't wait and you have one of the 24 Tacomas and you're worried about your transmission, again, Toyota's already taking full responsibility. They're saying, hey, we're putting it in writing that if, and that's a big if, you have an issue, you're already going to get a new transmission, so you got nothing to worry about. Yeah, it's going to be inconvenient. You're going to have to take your car in, you're going to have to get a loaner, and you're going to have to be without your truck for a while, but that just is what it is. Early adopters are also known as guinea pigs or beta testers. And you knew you were getting into that situation when you got your 24 Tacoma the moment it came out anyway, right?